They say some people don't realize what they have until it's gone. But that doesn't mean they're supposed to get it back. Or are they? The reality is that some men are going to leave and come back into your life, or you may have left them and they come back into your life. And the question becomes, what do you do when that happens? Or what should you do? Well, let me break it down for you. And we're going to get right into it, starting with number one. When a man comes back to you, don't react emotionally. All right. So what I've seen happen to so many women is that, again, whether it's you left him, he left you, you guys mutually separated, whatever, he ghosted you, the man tries to pop back up, and initially there's just an emotional reaction. That emotion might take you towards letting him back in because maybe you're lonely, maybe it's just he got you at the right time and you're willing to entertain what he has to say. Or it may be in the opposite direction where your emotions take you to F him. How dare he try to come back? I'm not even going to entertain this guy for 1 second. Now listen, I'm not saying at the moment whether letting him in or keeping him out is correct or not. What I'm saying is your emotions should not dictate that, all right? When the man comes back, you need to take a step back in that moment, in that day, whatever you need to do to make sure you think it out clearly. Now, some of you may say, forget all that. It's not that serious. If he didn't appreciate me the first time around, he needs to stay out of my life. But the reason why I don't want you to go straight to that is because, again, I've seen situations where the emotion said one thing, but when the woman actually took time to process, she was able to see more deeply into the situation to understand what needed to happen. And I'm going to lay some out for you of what may need to happen. So do not react emotionally. Allow yourself to process. Now, if you watch my videos, you know I'm all about intuition, and I'm never going to tell you to ignore your intuition. I just want you to make sure that emotions don't guide you in that moment. So process and properly evaluate the situation. Now, the second thing you should do when a man comes back is make sure you've gotten everything off your chest. Now, again, remember I just said I do not want you reacting emotionally because in some situations, I would argue in most situations, there are things you were not able to let out or you have not let out in regards to this man or what happened, all right? Again, whether it's he hurt you, whether it's you were afraid, whatever the case may be. And if you react emotionally and you shut the door, all right, or even let him back in too fast without giving yourself a chance to get things off your chest, you're only going to make matters worse. So, and please consider that when I say get things off your chest, I don't mean about that argument that you guys had that one time. I don't mean the lashing out you did when you felt like he disrespected you. I mean an opportunity to really flush everything out. Because one of the struggles that people have, all right, when they detach from somebody is the fact that they're still holding on to emotions or thoughts or feelings that they need to let out. And not letting out those things creates an attachment to the situation, good or bad. And when I say good or bad, whether the situation was good for them or not, it creates an attachment there, which becomes unhealthy. It creates a greater struggle and it makes it harder for you to see things clearly. Because again, when you have not let those things off your chest, that's what contributes to the emotional reaction. That's what contributes to blurring your vision of the situation and not understanding what needs to happen next. So this is a great opportunity to make sure, and we're not saying at the moment whether this will lead to you entertaining him and letting him back in or keeping the door shut ultimately. It's just that you need to see this as a chance to, okay, let me make sure I spoke my piece. Let me make sure I get everything out of my system and release all these things from my spirit. This will help you immensely in moving forward in whatever direction you need to go in. Now, the next thing to do, if he comes back to you, is ask yourself, is this fixable and is this worth it? So let's start with, is this worth it? Quick story. I know a woman and she was dealing with a guy. They were dating. And at that time, he was pursuing her hard. But she was resistant due to family and friends. And if I'm going to be completely honest, they felt like he was not at her level. They felt like he wasn't good enough, even though out of her own mouth, she felt there was a connection there. She was into the guy, but she was worried about his status and if this was really a right fit, so on and so forth. And so because of these hesitations and the family and friends pressuring her, she would not embrace this man fully. So eventually he gets to a point where he stops, all right? He's no longer pursuing her. I want to say maybe a year or so later, now she's hurt by this. Let me throw that out there. She's hurt by the fact that he now gives up the pursuit, even though, yes, she was not fully embracing him, which was wrong. I won't get all into that right now, but it was not fair for her to continuously reject them and then be mad at him that he finally gave up. He couldn't take it anymore. Because whether a man loves you or not, there's only so much he can take. I would argue when he does love you, he has less pain tolerance, so to speak. I think there's this misconception that, well, if he loves you or that person loves you, they're going to keep trying. No, a lot of times the person who doesn't love you, who just has an unhealthy attachment to you, they have the energy to keep trying no matter what, because your rejection does not hurt them to the core. They are not as affected by it in a way that deters them from keep trying. But imagine you as a woman, if you love the man and you're trying to be in his life and he keeps rejecting you, it will hurt you so much that you will get to a point where you can't keep putting yourself out there. Because it's just, again, it's more devastating than the person that you aren't really into like that. So anyways, getting back to the story, he finally gave up his pursuit. Years pass, he comes back into her life. So now here's the thing. Her emotional reaction leads her to rejecting him again. Because her emotions said, you hurt me when you left me the first time. Even though, again, it wasn't a fair situation. But this is how she processed it. And those emotions did not allow her to see the fact that, one, she didn't get everything off her chest, as we mentioned. Two, this was something that was worth pursuing. This was a situation where, yes, it would be worth it. And yes, it actually is fixable. All right. But again, emotions dictated her actions and it went left again and it didn't work out. So this is why it's so important for you to understand the need to take a step back, take a deep breath before you just react to things. But getting back to the point that I made on this one is, again, evaluate, is it worth it? And understand that if there was genuine love there, if this was a man that, okay, maybe there were mistakes made, maybe there was misunderstanding, maybe there was miscommunication, but those things are fixable, all right? Now, if it's not worth it, if it's a guy that you recognize, okay, no, there was no connection there, there was no real love there, it was unhealthy from the beginning, you always knew he was the wrong guy, so on and so forth, or he's coming back and he's not even coming back on some being serious, he's coming back still playing games, he's coming back not showing any growth, then of course, that's something that we don't entertain. I would still want you to get things off your chest, but you don't need to push things any further. But now let's break this down a little bit more. So let's get back to, let's talk about the fact that you looked at the situation and you determined it is worth it and it is fixable. So there's some things I want you to consider now if that is what's being determined. So the first thing, if we've determined that this is worth it and fixable. And let me also say this, because I feel like I'm hearing some of y'all right now in my spirit. Just because it's scary doesn't mean it's not worth it. Just because it seems difficult doesn't mean it's not worth it. All right? When I say something is worth it, I mean that there's genuine love and connection there. I mean that this is a guy who is willing to put forth the correct effort. This is a man who, again, he may have made mistakes, but he is willing to address and correct them. This is what I mean by it is worth it. This is a love worth pursuing, all right? But I know that sometimes, because it can feel very scary, because it can seem very difficult, because of all the outside noise that has been added to the situation, that can cause you to view it as not worth it. Do not let that fool you and throw you off track. All right. So going back to, we've determined that this is worth it. This is fixable. So number one, be open-minded and discuss all your concerns. So again, there's nothing wrong with being scared. There's nothing wrong with you saying, well, how could I really be sure I'm making the right decision by determining this guy is worth it and we can actually move forward? That's fine. That's understandable. Discuss those things. You know, the thing that sabotages and destroys potential relationships, whether in these dynamics or just starting off fresh, is the confusion. The confusion that comes from a lack of communication and a lack of understanding how the other person is feeling, all right? And when we have that confusion creates chaos. And that chaos creates more fear, insecurity, and toxic energy that now throws everything off. So it's important that if we're attempting to move forward, reconcile, work things out, whatever, that we be honest and forthcoming about how we feel, what fears do we have, talk it out. Put it out there. What are the concerns? If the concern is, well, how can I know I can trust you again after you did such and such? Say that. Let's discuss that. Because again, if he is serious and he is a man that's worth it, he's going to be willing to have those discussions. Because I always say the man who loves you wants to bring you clarity and peace. The ones who don't will bring you confusion and chaos or stress. All right? So put everything out there, but be open-minded. Don't project negativity onto the situation. Don't do things like, well, he'll never go for this, or he'll never do this, or he'll never be okay with that. Don't do that. If that's the case, let him show that that's accurate. Let him show you if he's going to prove you right in those negative things or prove you wrong and do the right thing. But give him the opportunity by discussing it and putting it out there, because that's what's going to be needed if there's going to be a healthy step forward in making things work. The next thing to also, again, really focus in on, if you're determining that this is worth it, and I said it once, but I'll say it again, is there a real connection there? Listen, I'm not going to sit here and push people to try to make things work with someone that they have no connection with, because to me, that's very pointless. But I will encourage and push people to do it when there is a connection. And now some of you may say, well, if there was a connection, how do we even end up in this situation where he has to come back? How do we even end up where we have to reconcile? Listen, I wish I could give y'all all the stories of people who had connection and ran from each other, or sabotage, or somehow, fear, hurt, whatever, lack of healing got in the way of two people who had a connection being together. And this is why I firmly believe in right person, wrong time. Because there are a lot of situations where you meet someone, and specifically here, you might meet a man, he is that guy. But unfortunately, you guys met at a time where you weren't truly emotionally ready to handle the level of vulnerability that connection requires, or to handle the level of maturity a successful relationship requires. And so now things go left, not because you guys aren't good for each other, aren't right for each other, but it was the wrong time. And now, again, I always hear y'all in my spirit. Some of y'all always say, well, if it was the wrong time, how could he be right? Why would God even let this person come into my life? Listen. Just because someone came into your life doesn't mean you were supposed to move forward with them at that time. See, the reality is that we move forward into these relationships because of what we want to do. We don't allow ourselves to process the proper timing of things a lot of times, because we're caught up in our draw to this person, our love for them, our desire for them, our connection with them. That can blind us from taking a step back and say, okay, maybe we have this thing here, right? But it's not time for us to really move forward in a romantic relationship. So when you say, why would God bring this person into my life? I will say, but did God tell you to go be with them at that time? Did God tell you to get romantically involved at that time? If not, then we can't put that on God. All right. But regardless, it's just that things get thrown off. And it can happen. So going back to the point, connection is the key. I'm a firm believer in that. And that's why I'm not going to dismiss the possibility that sometimes the man who comes back is the man you have a real connection with and is a man that you can have a great relationship with. Granted, many who will come back never belonged in your life and don't need to be entertained at all. And we'll go over some extra points in regards to that. But do not rule out the man who you have a real connection with. And then there's so much we can continue to talk about with this, but one more point I want to make in regards to you determining he's worth it and it's fixable is be willing to heal and don't be afraid to let him back in. And reality is that goes hand in hand. Like I said, these situations can be very scary. And many times we shut people out not because there wasn't a connection, not because they're not right for us, but because we're too scared to deal with the possibilities of being hurt again, moving forward, being disappointed, so on and so forth. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, timing is important. And just because someone came back right now still doesn't mean it's the right time right now. You could require more time. And that's why it's so important to make the time to heal. Now, I would love for you to have already healed by the time this person, if he is right for you, comes back into your life. But if you haven't, and now the opportunity presents itself, don't think you can skip that step and make it work with this man. Don't think, oh, okay, well, here's a second chance. I do love him. There is a connection. Let's just move forward. No, because if you don't heal, then you're going to find yourself back at square one. You're going to struggle in making this work. Connection cannot be destroyed, but a lot of trash can be thrown on top of it. All right. You can muddy the waters, so to speak, and make it difficult to maintain and sustain that relationship successfully. So you've got to be careful and make sure you do your part, not just for the sake of the potential relationship, but for you and your overall quality of life, and heal. And then with that healing, not be afraid to let him back in. And this is where, again, you got to trust that intuition. You got to trust your spirit. You got to talk to God. You got to be vocal and honest about your fears so you guys can walk through the fears together. You got to put it all out on the table because that's the only way to make it work. I know this sounds like a lot and this is heavy for those of you who may be facing this or who have faced this. But listen, I have to give you what's real, and this is what needs to happen. And again, I don't want to see people who belong together not being able to successfully make it happen because of all the lack of healing, fears, and other issues that throw things off track. Hey, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check this one out right here, and I'll see you there. I pray you receive the man who wants to love you, not just use you. And the reality is that there is a man out there for you. There is a man who wants to cherish you, honor you, and is going to fall deep